before going into the smart energy concepts and the relevance to the new normal and survival in future crisis, I have inserted another 3 slides to show the present condition of this earth with the mankind on it and with all these stresses coming on its resources. This is the population growth for the last 320 years or so. And we can see that after the industrial revolution, so-called industrial revolution, after which we have got all these vehicles, transportation, engines, electricity, and whatnot, the IT, computers, everything. So before that, the population has been pretty small. But after 1950, during the last 70 years, I would use the word the population has exploded. So the population, which has been below 2 billion in 1900, by now is almost 8 billion people, putting extra pressure on the resources on this planet. And then the second slide I have inserted is, even it has kind of surprised me, myself, because we can see that this is the average life expectancy globally and also regionally. And the different colors show the regional average life expectancy. Surprisingly, before 1875, like, the average life expectancy at birth has been below 40 years. I couldn't believe it at the beginning. But you can see after the Industrial Revolution, with the availability of mobility with vehicles and other facilities, modern Western medicine, together with the other medical systems in the Eastern side, and with all these things together, has lifted the average life expectancy, almost doubled it by now in every region, even in Africa, you can see that. So whether this is sustainable in the long run is a question. Whether this increased life expectancy is sustainable with 8 billion people, which is aspiring to be maybe 11, 12 billion by the end of the century, whether it is sustainable is a question. So with these pandemics, we should again look back and see the sustainability of the population with all these requirements of the every person and needing electricity, mobility, and all these things. And the third slide I have selected before my presentation is this history of pandemics. And we can see that in the recent years, the Spanish flu in 1920 has caused a significant loss of life, 2.7% of the population by that time. And the biggest recorded impact is in the Black Death in 1300 and so on. So COVID-19 has caused only about below 4 million deaths by now, but its conclusion is still unclear, with different waves coming in with different mutations and so on. So with that background, let me move on to my presentation on the smart energy and other related topics that I'm supposed to speak. So if we look at the pandemic experience we had, we learned the art of staying at home. We never believed that we would have to do it. Days and days, weeks and weeks, and then months, we stayed at home. And but almost everybody was connected to what is happening in the country and what is happening in the world. Instantly, the news was available, and so that facilitated everybody to know the reality, what is happening anywhere in the world. And online platforms such as Zoom gained immediate momentum and facilitated the living at home. And our basic needs were electricity, data, communication, and TV, radio, a little bit of medicine when necessary, food and money. And surprisingly, the doctor consultations for other diseases, especially these OPD consultations, were bare minimum. But I have not seen any news item showing a substantial mortality rate increase. Maybe it may be coming later, but still I couldn't see any substantial increase. So, so what is the smart energy and the new normal life? We can see that electricity and digitalization assisted us survive COVID crisis to a certain extent. But without them, maybe 1920 pandemic, I think most of them were living without both of these. So they have faced this differently. They have faced this differently, and maybe lives could have been saved if they had similar facilities. And health systems were greatly supported by exchange of data and other related information swiftly on a global basis to share knowledge as well as methods. Digital platforms enabled work from home. So all the essential services, even commercial services, could be maintained where necessary through these online platforms. So the crisis now has strongly emphasized the importance of the reliability of uh, the electricity supply and energy supply. Most important, the electricity supply. Now think about uh, a total blackout or a partial blackout that could have happened during the pandemic period, and how it would have affected everybody in homes, hospitals, and everywhere. Luckily, we didn't have many major failures. And moreover, now once upon a time, we thought in countries like Sri Lanka or in Asia, where large populations are living, whether we should automate too much of our systems because we need jobs for the people. So we thought that the automation is not, we should not go into that depth, especially in the electricity networks and all these things. But now we have come to a situation where we have to think differently. Under these pandemic conditions, it has opened our eyes to see. Now, what about the electrical network now run by a skilled workforce whom cannot be replaced overnight? And if they contracted this virus in mass, large numbers, and and that could have paralyzed the electricity supply, although the technical is available to operate the system. Therefore, now we have to think whether our critical system should be automated as much as possible with minimum human intervention so that their reliability can be increased to sufficient level so that in the future crises we can have a guaranteed supply of this, not only electricity, in all the critical services and supplies. And for that, so for example, we have put a computer into a traditional telephone and we made the smartphone. And same way we put a computer into the traditional wristwatch and made a smartwatch. And the same way, we can put a computer or computers into our passive electricity network and generating station and make a smart grid. So a smart grid with IT provides various applications such as SCADA, that is data acquisition and control, analysis and control and usage, and PLCs to interface between various inputs and outputs, and smart grids, smart meters and automated meter reading. We know that under pandemic conditions, we will not welcome a meter reader into our house. And in Sri Lanka, we have nearly 7 million customers. And every month, 7 million visits by the utility to these customers, except a few number of automated meters. So, which is a difficult exercise for the utility, as well as under pandemic conditions, it becomes almost an impossible task. And then through IT applications, how energy conservation can be brought about. And here's a picture of the Lakvijay control room, full of IT, full of digital applications. Now the controllers are there with minimum intervention, and they can put the machines on automatic operation mode and then sit back and relax. And so are the networks. So here is a modern control center which is managing an entire network of a country. So few operators can see the entire network and the critical circuit elements and make sure that everything is running smoothly. And under transient conditions, under uh, various catastrophic conditions, still they can manage the network to sufficient levels, minimizing the impacts. So a smart grid will intelligently interconnect the supply side nuclear power plants, other thermal power plants, hydropower plants, and more importantly, the solar and wind power plants, green energy plants, which have their own characteristics such as intermittency and seasonality. And two, a host of customers, which may be factories, houses, cities, and offices, and also fleets of electrical vehicles need to be charged. And how intelligently and economically and optimally manage these two systems by a smart grid without being a passive grid are the future questions, and which will enhance the self-reliance and autonomous operation of the grid, so that under a future crisis, the network will self-cure to certain extent and make sure that the supply reliability is maintained at the highest level with minimum human intervention. So a smart grid is intelligent, efficient, accommodating, and motivating. So when I say accommodating, it will accommodate many kinds of power sources like green energy sources like say PV, wind, despite their drawbacks like intermittency and seasonality. And it will motivate customers to use electricity efficiently and intelligently so that they can minimize their costs. For example, their charging of equipment like cars can be done at off-peak hours where the electricity is cheap. So these things are yet to come in Sri Lanka, because we sometimes the domestic customers, our major portion is domestic customers. They have flat tariffs, but in modern thinking, in smart thinking, I think gradually we should move towards time of day tariffs so that these things can be applied uh, much better way, so for the benefit of the utility as well as to the customers. And also a smart grid is opportunistic, quality focused, resilient, and green. Resilient in the sense, in case of disaster or issue with the network grid, it can heal itself or get into uh, self-operating several networks rather than a total collapse. So in Sri Lanka also, I know the utilities trying these things. That's good. That is making the grid smarter and smarter, so that rather than an island-wide failure, the network will segregate into different islands and operate, providing services at least to a portion of the customers until things are put back on the normal operating modes. So let me conclude my remarks here by looking at Sri Lanka's demand on electricity curve, daily demand curve. So we can say it is rather crooked curve. There are several peaks. You can see a peak in the morning, peak during the daytime, peak in the evening. So this is a challenge for the utility to meet. And also it's an expensive business to maintain capacity to meet the evening peak, unnecessary evening peak. So how can this curve be made flatter and flatter so that the, the assets can be put into better service? So these things are the things to be looked at in the future through a smart grid. So a smart grid will facilitate survival of the electricity system with minimum human intervention, which will be very important under pandemic condition or any other threatened conditions for the reliable supply of electricity to the people, because electricity drives everything. Without electricity, today's any essential service, any health service, any digitalization, any IT service cannot operate. Therefore, it is very important in the future we make sure that in Sri Lanka we will have a reliable electricity supply. And I understand today's two speakers one will concentrate on the digitalization aspect. The second one will concentrate on the cost aspects of electricity, because providing electricity at any cost is not the solution, because that will kill an economy. Therefore, the second speech will look at the cost aspects of electricity, which is important for all of us, because if the utility is running at a loss, that means all of us are running at a loss. With that, I conclude my remarks. Thank you very much, everyone.